ourselves despite how much we might feel passionate about this, to see if we're actually doing it. So in my cataloging, I found, these are, I hope this is, oops, wrong way. Wrong way. Let's see if we can go back. Okay. So in my cataloging of composers, as I said, it was 135 pieces. I think I have a few more because since I started this, I've judged a few more competitions from all over the country. And this was the stats. There was one female composer, one Black composer, 3 American composers, and one of the Black composers also fell into that category. 2 Latin American composers, and only 2 living composers in all of these pieces from many states. So it's not just one region of the country. I found that the most programmed composers were Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, and Liszt. And less than 9% of student programs, and this is including from beginner levels, included composers from marginalized groups. And I just want to say, I'll come big screen now, is that I actually did another festival here in Tennessee, and I actually saw someone program La Petite Negre, which you might know is actually a racial slur. And it's something that shouldn't be programmed without understanding and talking through, what does that mean? What does Debussy's piece mean? And it was actually very interesting to me because the student brought the book, which was actually a very dated edition. It was probably from the 90s. And it actually had a character in blackface. And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, who would program this? But we all do these things probably mindlessly, just thinking, oh, this is a popular children's piece, and don't realize the gravity of what those pieces actually meant at that time. In this particular instance, something very derogatory towards Black people. And so I put a little note, I was very nice that the student was only like 7 years old. And I didn't want to crush their spirit because they played the piece very well and as Debussy wrote it. But it's very important that we don't sort of flippantly program things that actually have really heavy meanings for some cultural groups or some people. And so I just wanted to bring that up as we think about programming, for us to be more aware. All of us should be more aware of what we're programming, the images that we're showing our students. You don't want an edition that has actual blackface in it. I couldn't believe I was actually seeing this and not telling the student what that actually means. Okay, so I'm done with the downer moment for the day. Let's go back to how we can solve this. So thinking about, what are you really programming? I have to even call myself out on this. What am I really programming? Am I getting away from how I was taught? I was not taught to play Black composers or female composers or living composers. And so it's a real exercise for a teacher to move past their own training and to walk the talk, as I say. So here's the formula. I would encourage you to write it down because this is where we're going to go into our groups. So I'll explain the thought process. Of course, you can use this all of the time with any level student when you're thinking about programming. And I also want to mention, of course, it would be difficult for every student, all of their pieces to check all of these boxes. So I assume that, you have studios of multiple students. And what I do is just try to make sure that everybody's doing something from the list, so that when we have studio class or recitals, festivals, competitions, that everyone is hearing it all of the time. You may remember from your own days of study, in studio class, you might have heard a piece one of your peers were playing and you thought, I want to play that one day. But you can't play them all at the same time. So that's the thought process here. So first, I always like to think about gender. And historically, we've programmed a lot of European dead males. So thinking beyond that category, and am I programming, or someone in my student playing someone that doesn't fall in that category? The next thing you want to think about is ethnicity. So I love to use our own great country as an example. In America, we have many different racial groups under one ethnicity, and that these two categories go along with each other: ethnicity, race, and colorism. So within many ethnicities, there are different races and there are different shades, and that's a really beautiful thing. And so we want to think, if we're programming American composers, that we include composers of different races, of actual different shades and hues, from the darkest browns to the white is persons as well. So when I program American composers, I want to think about Copland, but I also want to think about William Grant Still. I also want to think about a new composer I've been learning about is Carolina Calvache, a Colombian American. I want to think about all the different races that we have within those ethnicities, and that goes for other countries as well. So think about that. Also think of country of origin. So we might like playing a lot of music from France or a lot of music from Germany, but we don't play other pieces from other parts of Europe. So that's another thing to think about, as what is your country of origin? How can you incorporate that into your studio? Or what if it's your student's country of origin? And how can we find some composers from that country? I have a student that's from Belize, and I will admittedly say that I was actually thinking to myself when I met him, where is Belize again? I don't remember where it is exactly. Well, now I know very well that it's in Central America. I know that they do not speak Spanish, which embarrassingly I asked him, like, what language do you all speak? And so I know a lot about the country of Belize. And I'm a better teacher because I expanded my own range of countries to play music from. And so anyway, my point is, we actually found a composer, Erilyn Wallen, who's from Belize. And that was so much fun for my student to go on that discovery journey, but also for me to educate myself, because there's no way we can know everything about every culture and ethnicity and different countries around the world. So it's really a great exploratory moment for us as teachers as well, to dive into our own students' countries of origins or their races or ethnicities. And then fifth on this list is living composers. Not a new conversation. I mean, I think people have been talking about living composers for forever. But unfortunately, as you can see in the survey, for some reason, they're still not making it regularly into festival programming, into competition programming, or perhaps not as much as we would like. And then the last category I would say would be just underperformed works, period. And that could be underperformed works by Beethoven, underperformed works by Mozart, anything that's new, but that we just don't know that much about. So I hope you all understand the list. Is there any questions about the list before we move on? Awesome. Okay, so here is the moment where we get to break out. I hope that you all take a picture of that list. Our first exercise is going to be to use the formula that I just mentioned to create 1 to 2 programs, maybe just one, just based on our time here, one program for an intermediate student, and try to choose at least 2 to 3 of those categories that I just gave you alongside your standard repertoire. And I will give you all, I think about 5 minutes to do that. And if somebody's close to the screen, I'll just wave when the time is up. And then I'd love a spokesperson from each group to just tell, everybody what you came up with. Does this sound good? Great. Okay. So get in your groups. Remember, you want to create a program using 2 to 3 of the categories alongside standard rep. So I would say if you could come up with a program of 4 pieces from our 4 musical categories, that would be awesome.
Probably in a workshop, we can program things yeah. want to match the parts of style of Lotus. I believe. That's where it's very. So I'm not exactly sure about that. But it's a nice sometimes later when it gets advanced. Yes. Yeah. You know, it's somewhat accessible. That's why I know. I don't just look at it's just
All right, group, 1 minute.
Yes, that's right here. That's what I should
I absolutely explained that. That's like an immediate. You know, like
and the 5-week sketches are actually my favorite. I love to program.
Okay, I know it's not enough time. So do we have spokesperson from each group? It looks like you all have divided yourself up into 4 groups. This is awesome. We could just go around the room and I will be typing all of this into this document, what you all tell me. Who wants to go first?
we have a great spokesman.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Okay, okay. All right, so we'll go first. So we're talking intermediate programming, and we had a really big range actually with intermediate. It's such a term. And so we had a big range of like really late intermediate, which Sharon actually suggested some wonderful pieces by Tanda, which are short snippets that are accessible for later intermediate students, all the way to, I suggested for earlier intermediate students. We of course have much earlier as well, Ignatius Sancho, who was a Black British composer, who's actually the first Black Briton to ever vote in a British election. And he lived from like 1729 until 1980. He has several collections of minuets and country dances that are excellent for the early intermediate student and teaching that early classical, late Baroque minuet and dance style at the keyboard. And those are wonderful pieces to program instead of just the same old Bach minuets and pencil minuets that are done over and over and over again. We also talked about the pieces for children by William Grant Still, of which like the 5 animal sketches are some of my favorites. And these are great intermediate pieces as well. So I think we have 4, sorry, we went over.
No, that's great. So just because I'm putting it in the document, you said Ignatius Santo. Can you just tell me the composers one more time?
Ignatius Sancho. So Ignatius Sancho, Sencho. Lived from 1729. His birth wasn't documented because it was actually on a slave ship, but he died in 1780. Our other composers were Tanda and William Grant Still, and then we started talking about Chiquinha Gonzaga too, for like tangos and habaneras.
Awesome. Yeah. Can someone put that in the chat? Could you type that in the chat for us so I make sure I spelled that correctly? That would be amazing.
Sure.
Yes, because there's a little bit of echo too. So I'm like, oh, I think I heard this, but then that would be very comical when I come up with composers who don't even exist and put them in the document. So, okay, thanks so much. Okay, next group, what you get?
Want me to? Oh, okay. All right. Can you hear me? Okay. So our first composer is Valerie Capers, an African American composer. We chose some pieces from her book Portraits in Jazz. A couple that we really liked were Waltz for Miles and Billy's Song. So she wrote these pieces in the style of these various jazz composers. So Miles Davis.
What was her last name again? Did you say?
Valerie Capers.
Okay.
And Billie Holiday. Our next composer was Manuel Ponce, who was Mexican. And I think his picture was on that. Who's that? I knew the composer, but not his face. And he has a piece called Intermezzo in E minor. So that's really lovely. And then we liked Florence Price. One was out of, it was called Ticklin' Toes. From piano music of Africa and the African diaspora. And then another piece of hers that I really like is called Win Wham, which is maybe more late intermediate. And then we chose another piece, was that from book 1? Yes. Nkeru Okoye, who was Nigerian, Dancing Barefoot in the Rain.
Very good. And you don't have to worry about typing them. I'm typing them all. You're going to get a link to the document that has over 300 pieces. So you're going to have plenty of ideas by the end of this. Great. If you could type that African composer in the chat, that'd be awesome. So I spell it correctly.
Can you spell the last composer's name for me?
Sure. Nkeiru. And then last name Okoye.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Okay, who's our next group?
We have 2 spokespeople, so I just want to start with women composers because there's a certain book that I love to teach out of for my intermediate students, women composers in history. And I thought when I'd be able to talk about women composers down at NKU, it's from Colin Leonard. So women composers I really like in there. Now I know about Amy Beach. Of course, I've read some of her pieces before, but all the pieces for children, they're also available on IMSLP as well. So I really like her things. Of course, Schumann, she had her birthday a couple of years ago. So it's all very Eurocentric, but I like the way it's female composers. There's some Benny Mendelssohn in there, and just lots of pieces that I can, a big range too. It does say intermediate, but I think it probably gets into some Chaminade, who also wrote some more intermediate, but think of like Scarf Dance and more advanced. And Holly's going to talk about some world music.
Yeah, well, about a year ago, I did a recital of music from around the world, and I try not to call it world music because we're all part of the world. You know, I don't want to be like, here's us, and then here's everything else. So, but my problem is I have a lot of students who are really young, you know, like 6 to 9 year olds who are just starting out, and it's really tricky to have them do any music. I mean, I was just telling Suzanne, my mom, that they couldn't do anything in that book that she's talking about. So I found some things for my world music recital. One of my friends actually in Texas, Nikai P. He has a group of books that's called Piano Accents, and this one he arranged music from piano music from Africa. So like African folk songs or national anthems, that kind of thing. I did with my student. It was probably in paper 2A, 2B. I did Siyahamba, which is a South African song. Yeah, you know that one. Or Jambo Blana is a Kenyan song that's stuck in my head always. Like he also has a Latin American one, but his name is Nikai, Neekai, and last name is B-Y. And then the other one, which is a little more mainstream, but maybe you've seen the Faber Music from China books. And, well, I can't pull this up very well. Yeah, maybe you've seen this at Stanton's or at Graves. Oh my gosh, okay. Well, it's not pulling up, but for example, there are some pieces that are, again, for very beginning students that are just a melody. And it's not arrangements of pieces, well, it's some arrangements of folk songs, but it's all by Asian composers that are compiled by Faber. So I thought that was great. It wasn't just, you know, white composers arranging Chinese melodies or anything. So this is an actual, or a real song by Song Tong, and that is S-A-N-G, like sang, and then Tong is T-O-N-G. So a pretty big range, but more for the beginner students are those two books that I used to kind of program things for my music around the world website. But I will say it was really tricky to to be able to do that for beginner students. But yeah, so.
Amazing. Also, if you could come as a spokesperson and put that in the chat, that's great. I'm always having people ask for beginner resources, so thank you for bringing that.
Yeah.
All right, and last but not least, I think we have one more group. Oh, I can see you well. You're sitting next to the computer. I probably could hear you the best.
I know, that's true. You can see me though?
Yeah.
My head's not cut off. It is. Oh gosh, this is when you're put on the spot, it's kind of hard. So one that was mentioned was already like Amy Beach. What was the?
She didn't mention something specific.
Nothing specific. Yeah, we just happened to come across what would be the children's album. So in a way to say female composer, but then also being classic with just having seen the titles Minuet, Gavotte, Waltz. So sort of still embracing what would be what would be the classics in terms of the dances. Again, minuet, gavotte, waltz, march, polka. We also have come where we have Harry T. Burleigh. I don't know if this is new to me as far as composer but he is an African American composer, 1866 to 1949. With this one, this is titled From the Southland. So very much of nature. You have 6 pieces, and it is of an intermediate level. But titles very descriptive: Through Monin Pines, The Frolic, in and spelled as such, in the cold moonlight. So spelling it, in the phonetics, like the would be DE, and then coal, COL with an apostrophe. A Jubilee, On Bended Knees, A New Hiding Place. This one looks lovely as I glanced at it too. So
Actually, Ashley played those at our
Yeah.
recital.
Oh,
She
really?
played all of them.
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the one that we had in the
oh,
fall.
wonderful. Okay, so I missed
Yeah.
that. So,
What is
but
the, spell the last name, please?
Burleigh is as I'm thinking, Burleigh,
Burleigh.
but excuse me, Burleigh. And then we have we have a Chinese composer. His name is Shifu. Not to mistaken it. All of a sudden, I thought of Kung Fu Panda. But is that the same probably spelling? I don't know. But anyway, Shifu is the composer name. Oh, this is the hard part. I'm Filipino, by the way, but Xinjiang Suite. So I will spell this out for you. But the great thing is I got to perform this along with my friend here, Sally. She actually wrote about him in her dissertation. And so it is interestingly, Asian composer, but with, I don't know why I'm looking, there's you. Asian composer and with a little bit of Spanish elements of within the music. I too also performed it, so I really enjoyed it. So it's something to introduce. It might be more for the early advanced level, but certainly encompasses, once again, a little bit of the ethnic qualities different. So with those that we've presented to you and to all, would be like a combination of not just only possibly like the African American, but then also the elements of nature, Shifu in this case with Xinjiang Suite. Okay, and with Spanish, and what's the other? Oh, Amy Beach, and then neoclassic. So, so those are our 3 representing those works. So, yay!
Oh my goodness. You all, and I love doing this exercise because I learn just as much as you all learn from each other and we learn from each other. It's so amazing. I love that H.T. Burleigh suite. That's a really good, great suite, and so many other ones that you all mentioned. Okay. So, I mean, we could be here all day, you all. I love this workshop strategy of 4 groups and you all bringing show and tell. This is great. I'm going to share my screen again and give you what I came up with for the same category and maybe a couple more resources that you all can use. So a lot of the things that you all mentioned, I actually had on my list. Yay! This is exciting when we're actually starting to track together and more people are knowing about the repertoire. So we create a new standard repertoire. So I also put in the underperformed category, the Telemann Fantasia in G minor. It's great to add another composer to our Baroque standard repertoire. Seems like we get a lot of Bach and Scarlatti, but that's it. And so I love that someone also mentioned another Baroque composer in this session. The William Grant Still was also on my list, and Maria Corley's Recess from Nautical Glimpses. It's a really fun piece. It has a little quotation from Nana Nana Boo Boo off of the playground, straight from the playground. So I encourage you to take a screenshot and you can look up some of those pieces and what they sound like. I also love that suggestion from the Faber Music from China. And I want to just do another plug for the Hal Leonard Folk Song series. This book series also goes from, I would say, you know, a beginner, actually a middle beginner, all the way up to early advanced. I did get the opportunity to contribute to the collection as one of the arrangers for the African American folk songs collection. But as I mentioned, they have folk songs from around the world, and I love what you said. It's weird to say world music because we're all a part of the world. So yes, I love that they're being so inclusive and thinking about ethnicity and nationality from all over the world. So I would encourage you to check out the series. I'd of course love if you check out the one that I wrote for the African American folk songs. Just for time's sake, I'm going to skip the performance of it and go to the next slide, which is another group breakout, which I want to do, but I think I might open this up in more of a question format and go ahead and tell you some of my suggestions for advanced programming, and then we can just chat at the end. So in the advanced programming category, I picked a Bach Prelude and Fugue. So remember that when we program, of course, we're not going to get rid of what we've thought of as standard repertoire for so long, but we just want to add more voices to the canon. So I also chose the Beethoven Six Variations, which isn't performed that much, but we, of course, all have heard many of Beethoven's other pieces. So why not incorporate some of the works we don't hear as often by a famous composer? And then I personally love Clara Schumann's Scherzo Number 2. Another Baroque composer that we don't hear enough of is Rameau. This is an excellent suite if you're not familiar with it. You know, it's in the advanced category, but honestly, I think that it could be used even at the late intermediate level because the pieces are short and they're actually, some of them are not that difficult. So I would look into this particular suite. I added the Mozart Fantasy, which is very well known, but then pairing it with Samuel Coleridge Taylor's forest scenes. I actually, you know, I started doing this, as I said, you know, back in 2020, and I embarrassingly told you all my confessions of all the DEI and all the different forums I'm in that talk about repertoire and, you know, really challenging myself to break away from my own training because, you know, this was not a part of my training either. And so since then, I will say I've been doing much better. But I actually programmed the forest scenes to actually one of my students who has special needs. And she loves this piece. And I think what's cool about it, especially just thinking about inclusivity, even for students with handicaps, is that she has been able to learn how to play in an expressive manner by playing this music. So not only are we incorporating an Afro-British composer, but we're also welcoming in other communities and teaching them how to express themselves in ways that maybe they would not get the opportunity. So I love that piece and I love that opus. And then a third program, I've been hearing Cécile Chaminade, a popular female composer. This piano sonata in C minor is really great as a big work if you need something for a competition program. And I also included a Chinese composer, He Luting, Cowherd's Flute. I really like that piece. I'm yet to convince one of my students to play it yet, but I think that it's a really great work. There are several really great recordings out there for you to listen to. And then, oh, look, there's a bonus program here. Program 4, I added the Clementi Sonata. Of course, we hear lots of Beethoven and Mozart, but in my opinion, we only hear not some of Clementi's best work, and Clementi wrote so many fantastic sonatas, and really more of them should be played. I paired that with American composer Charles Griffiths, The White Peacock. And I'm sure many of you have heard of Charles Griffiths, and he falls into American Impressionism. We play lots of Debussy and Ravel, but maybe not looking within our own nationality if you are American. Right here, we have American Impressionism. And also another American composer, H. Leslie Adams, also falls into living composer category. He has a collection of etudes. So if you're not familiar with H. Leslie Adams, I would say they rival the set of Chopin's etudes in expressivity and difficulty and technical demand. I would really encourage you to take a look at his set of etudes if you're looking for something for an advanced student. Okay, we made it to the end. Now, I would love to hear any other thoughts that you might have or suggestions that you had for the advanced repertoire category that we could just talk about as a group since we're almost out of time. Yes.
Recently played the George Walker Prelude and Caprice, and that was really nice. There were parts that were really awkwardly written, and then I heard that one of the movements, like when he was a student, and then another movement 5 years later, and put them together. But that was a really great piece. But I also had a question if anyone has any recommendations for advanced level duets, because my students and I are so excited about being in person again, and we're doing more duets. The recitals in 6 weeks, and almost everybody's got their duet. And I'm like, I forgot to make sure that I include composers of diversity and make the program more diverse. So if anyone has any suggestions for that, I've got a couple more students left. I haven't picked out duets for. We've all talked about solo music, so any suggestions are welcome.
Well, I'm waiting for the floor. Does anybody have any suggestions? Well, I have a couple actually myself. So, and I'm actually gonna just kind of pull this up on my own end. So, not by a Jamaican composer, but Jamaican Rumba is a really great piece if you haven't heard it, and it's piano four hands. And I've got it all here on the side. My brain is like, it's Friday, and you're asking so much of me today. It's a great four hands piece, and I would say that it's easy to manage for any student, really. So let me just make sure I give you all of the right composers. So it's author Benjamin, Jamaican Rumba. That's a great piece. There's also a piece called 3-Day Mix by Eleanor Alberga. I'm actually learning this one myself for a concert coming up. And you can play that on with four hands or two pianos. And that's an awesome work, and a living composer, as we were just talking about, that you could add into the mix. There's another piece, hold on, I'm looking it up, that I love by, I believe it's a Spanish composer. Yeah. The Dances Andaluces, El Vito, that's a really popular one by Manuel Infante. And a good showpiece too. So if you have students that like that kind of showy music, you need a closer. Those are three really great ones. And I'll put that on the Google Doc too. So I'm glad you asked.
Great.
Any other suggestions on the advanced level or questions? I'll just open the floor.
Artina.
Oh, you're sitting by the computer, so you should stay there because then I can actually.
Right. I mean, so you can see the face. Are you familiar with Valerie Coleman?
Yeah, I got to play with her a couple years ago, and that was awesome. And yeah.
So, I played it though a couple years ago. I performed her Portraits of Langston. So just very, very eclectic. I'm just on the, the poems and Harlem, just representing that. So I did it with I performed with Antoine Clark.
Oh,
Dennis.
tell him hello.
So oh, you know him?
Yeah.
So wonderful. I'll have to let him know. But he invited me because it was, celebrating African American history and so forth. And this was 2019. But the fact that I took on this work, I said it's just absolutely amazing. So I just thought that's something to, for an advanced repertoire, to represent female composer and African.
Yeah, I was asking Valerie, I'm like, why haven't you written anything for piano? She has so much, woodwind or chamber music, but her music is really hard. Like, way to go for taking that on. I practiced it earlier in the year, and I'm like, whoa, goodness, this is a piano concerto. It's so tricky, but
yes.
there's so much works. If you're looking for chamber music works, her Wish Sonatine is amazing. It's a piece that explores the middle passage and also the victory on the other side of it. So, I mean, all of her music is really, really difficult, but it's also really, really rewarding too. So thanks for putting her name in the mix there. And the Prelude and Caprice, that's also an awesome work. And William Nyaho's book, his collection, many of you might know, Piano Music from Africa and the African Diaspora, is a very important collection of works from all over the world from composers of African descent. And if you don't have that one, that definitely should be in your wheelhouse from the beginning levels all the way to advanced. So I just want to mention that it is graded from the beginning to the advanced, because I know we have a lot of conversation around advanced repertoire, but maybe not as much around the beginning and intermediate levels. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, wonderful.
One quick question. You just mentioned a collection. Do you have a suggestion for a collection that is, I mean, it's hard to have students, you know, buying lots and lots of books, but a collection that has sort of a versatile, you know, representation of various things we've talked about today, and about the intermediate level or upper intermediate. Is there, you mentioned a couple of collections. Do you have some ideas?
Yeah, well, there's also a Florence Price collection, and in this document that you all receive, I send it to Ashley, Elizabeth, and Teresa, so you can, you know, forward it to your chapter. There's gonna be like 200 pieces on there, links and all that stuff. But you know, that's a really good conversation. You know, you have things like the RCM, that's a collection of graded works with all types of composers. And I think more and more publishers are realizing the need for diversity, like the Hal Leonard collection that I mentioned. You know, William Chapman Niaho was one of the pioneers with that, with Black composers. But there's not everything in one place. So, you know, maybe that's something that we as piano teachers need to demand, that it's all in one place. So it's like, oh, I don't have to go get the Florence Price collection. Oh, let me go get the William Grant Still collection. Like, oh, now let me go get the music from China. You know, why can't it just be, you know, Faber has a collection and all of it's there? I mean, I think that would be amazing. But no, I do not know of one collection that sort of has everything in one place.
Be nice if it were graded selections, you know, so that you could have various kinds of pieces at a different grade level. I mean, it's really hard to collect all of them, so.
It is. It's hard to collect all of them. You're right. That's a good topic for MTNA next year. I'll have to keep that in mind.
I'll be there.
Anything else? Well, I've enjoyed being with your group, you know, from far away from Memphis. You all are clearly at the front of this conversation, and you had so many wonderful suggestions and so many repertoire and show and tell. I love that. Sometimes I come and people are like, oh, I don't know anybody that's not Bach, Beethoven, or Brahms. So I just want to congratulate you on the work that you're clearly already doing, and thank you for the invitation to be with you this morning. Oh, and if there's any last composers you want to throw in the chat, please do. And you'll get the link this afternoon, or later. It's morning for me, but later in your afternoon. So I hope that you enjoy browsing through all of those resources. And I think
Thank you.
yeah, thank you all.